Hello everyone, we will just wait a minute for people to join the webinar. Welcome. Great to see the numbers creeping up on the screen. Welcome from wherever you're joining from across the globe. Okay, so I think we will get started. So hello everyone and welcome to IFOAM Organics International's monthly webinar. Today we're going to be talking about extreme heat and how our food and farming systems can mitigate and adapt to the impact of increasing temperatures. My name is Sarah Compson and I'll be your moderator today. I'm the Director of Standards Innovation at the Soil Association in the UK, and I'm also part of the World Board of IFOAM Organics International. And in a moment, it will be my great pleasure to introduce you to the speakers for today's session. But firstly, some house rules. So this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on YouTube and our website. So you can rewatch your favourite bits and share them with your colleagues, especially for those of you who it might be the middle of the night rather than the middle of the day right now. Please send your burning questions anytime using the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll gather them up and answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A question section and also in the chat as much as possible too. Please keep your questions really clear and concise, as that will make it much easier for our presenters to answer. And please stick to the theme of today's webinar so we can make the most of the great body of knowledge that we have on our panel and get the most from their great insights. And finally, please, of course, keep questions respectful and constructive. We're really here to learn from each other today, and this is a great opportunity to do just that. So now let's dive into the webinar. Now, there's no escape from rising temperatures, and in many parts of the world, climate change is already having a devastating effect on crop yields, including of major staple crops like corn, rice and wheat. And it doesn't take much of an increase in temperatures to have a really big effect. So studies have indicated that just 1 degree Celsius of warming can lead to average yield decreases of around 7% for corn, 6% for wheat and 3% for rice. And livestock, of course, will also be affected as mortality rates go up and fertility rates go down, which means that eggs, meat, milk, and other goods derived from livestock will feel the heat too. The knock-on effects of climate change-induced intense heat are not only felt on farms, but on the whole food system. And at best, this leads to rising prices, and at worst, represents fundamental risks to food security around the world. However, there is some good news. There are farmers all around the globe that are figuring out how to overcome these challenges and are developing and innovating solutions right now. And because organic agriculture is an approach to farming that works with the systems and cycles of nature inherently, this means that the mindset, the approaches, and the techniques of organic farmers can really lead the way in how the world mitigates and adapts to the realities of farming in a warming world. So the aim of today is to introduce you to some of the people and the ideas that are tackling the challenges of extreme heat head on. We'll hear about projects and approaches that are being pioneered by organic farmers around the world, and we hope that the ideas they share will inspire and inform you. And we also hope that this conversation will foster some global connections, making this a start of some really important discussions and practical action that helps organic farmers and the wider food system to adapt to a hotter future. So now it's time to introduce our speakers. They're going to help give an overview about this topic. And we gathered a diverse group of voices from different regions. And today our experts are Lin Bautze from the Research Institution Fiebel, Switzerland. Lin works for various climate change mitigation and adaptation projects in the Department for Soil Sciences I'll ask her to introduce herself more in a moment. We also have Asan Alymkulov, who's Project Development Manager at BOKG Federation for Organic Development in Kyrgyzstan. At BOKG, his team has implemented climate adaptation initiatives for 12 years now. We've also got Pham Van Hoi, who's the Director at the Center for Agricultural Research and Ecological Studies in Vietnam. He's done research on organic participatory guarantee systems in Vietnam, as well as climate mitigation measures. Next, we'll have Évelyne Alcázar Marín, who is Director of EcoValia's Brussels office, and she's been involved in the organic sector in different capacities for over 20 years and is board member of IFOAM Organics Europe. We also have special participation from Dr. Carly Hyland, who's Assistant Professor at the University of California in Berkeley. She won't be able to join us live, unfortunately, but she sent us a video to contribute to this topic, and her work is focused on mitigating health effects of climate change amongst workers in food systems. With this powerful lineup, I want to thank you for joining us, and we really appreciate you all being here. So we're going to start off with a short introduction from each speaker who will introduce their work in relation to each topic. After they've done that, we'll then have a short discussion amongst the panelists before each of them then presents a relevant aspect of their work in a little bit more detail. And then after that, it will be over to you, our audience, to ask questions to our experts. So again, please use the Q&A box to submit these, and we'll get through as many as we can over the course of the next couple of hours. So great. First of all, over to you, Lin. Please introduce yourself and a bit about your area of work and the priorities that you see in relation to this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, as you heard, I'm Lin Bautze, working for FIBEL Switzerland, which is the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture. We have several locations, and currently I'm sitting here at 37 degrees, also, yeah, live from Switzerland. We have different departments where I basically work for the soil science department, but FIBEL is focusing also on many other areas of agriculture research, focusing on organic and biodynamic agriculture. And in the soil science department, we are focusing especially on the role of soils and climate mitigation and adaptation, but also nutrient management, symbiosis, cultivation techniques. And we also have a very good long-term running trial, the so-called DOG trial, which I will explore and explain a little bit later in the presentation. So from my side, I work in various projects related to climate change mitigation, but also adaptation. I just listed here the three main projects that I'm currently working on, but I have been doing a lot of different projects since I'm 19. So I work in this climate area for quite some time now and focused really on the role of farmers and what they can do to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and at the same time go more for climate change adaptation. And actually, upon tomorrow, I will start also to work for FIBEL as a climate resilience coordinator. So this means that I will step into more of the role of adapting to climate change and achieving our vision to support farmers and advisors and researchers and policymakers to come to smart climate decisions very shortly from my side. Thank you.
Great, Lin. Well, you got full marks for a very quick introduction. Thank you very much. Okay, so could we now hear from Asan all the way from Kyrgyzstan? Could you give us a full introduction, please?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear organic colleagues. So my name is Asan, and I serve as the Project Development Manager at BioKG, Federation of Organic Development in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan, as you know, is a small mountainous country in Central Asia, where farming has always been tied closely to nature, and where climate change is no longer a future concept, but a daily reality. At BioKG, we coordinate a national countrywide network of organic communities called Organic IMAX. And these are clusters of organic villages working together under a participatory guarantee system, or PGS. We are currently working with over 1,000 farmers across 9 organic IMACs located in rural and often high altitude areas. Some are more than 2,000 meters above sea level. So for the past 10 years, we've seen firsthand how extreme heat is transforming these regions, withering crops, shifting seasons, drying rivers, and shortening the window of safe cultivation. Farmers tell us that traditional crops, which used to thrive in the cool mountain climate, are now struggling. At the same time, we're seeing new opportunities with more heat resilient. And in my presentation, I'll share how our farmers are adapting, not through large machinery or external technologies, but through agroecological practices, traditional knowledge, and community-led innovation. And I'll also highlight the role of PGS, not just as a certification tool, but as a living framework for climate resilience, where farmers use seasonal inspections and peer learning to monitor environmental change and adjust their methods in real time. We believe that local systems, when rooted in trust, knowledge, and community, can be powerful drivers of adaptation. And I hope our experience from Kyrgyzstan can inspire similar efforts in other climate vulnerable regions. And thank you, and I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Great, thank you very much, Asan. It's going to be a really interesting presentation, and I'm sure there's a lot that our fellow panelists as well as the audience will learn from what you've got to add, so thank you. Hoi, over to you. Please, could you introduce yourself and a bit about your work?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very, very good, because I'm not really good in high tech. I just changed my microphone and I'm afraid that I cannot speak to you. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Vietnam. I'm Pham Van Hoi. I have a different mixed educational background. I pursue, agronomy when I was university student, and then I moved to sociology for MSc, and then environmental sociology for my PhD in Hyland. And I get back Vietnam and work most on agroecology as a subject. The subject that I have been teaching for university student and MSc student for the last 20 years, 25 years. But for the last 10 years or so, I start to work on agroecology research and develop some integrated model targeted for urban agriculture, and that I'm going to share you in this evening. And that's at the moment I also have some project with FIBO. Maybe I see Lin before. Lin, I have project with Christian robot home, and yeah, I think I met you there.
Okay.
And at the moment we have two project focusing on organic vegetable with FIBO in Switzerland, and I'm very happy to see you and also receive your question in the coming hour. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Hoi. And I saw you nodding when Asan was talking about PGS and the value of PGS in this context. So hopefully we can dig into some of that later as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Évelyne, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And I don't know, good afternoon or good morning for some of you. I'm talking from Spain, in the south of Europe. We are located in a place that is called Agro-Mediterranean area. This place is very much affected by the climate change. Was one of the first countries in the Agro-Mediterranean area that is starting to be affected. Then we are already suffering the effects since several years ago. Most concretely, we have a very big drought period during the last 5 years. Luckily, this year starting to have the rain again, but with a big increase of the temperatures. My organization, Ecovalia, I'm going to share with you a bit. I don't know if you see it.
We don't see any slides at the moment, Évelyne. I'm not sure if Nika is able to share them.
It's now?
Ah, there we are.
Okay.
Yes, it's just waking up. Yep, we've got them.
Yeah. My organization, Ecovalia, is near to have 35 years. The next year we will be aware that our birthday of 35, and we were working to develop the organic sector in Spain and working closely with some South American countries and some organizations from there. In Spain is the biggest area for organic in Europe. We are representing, our organization Ecovalia is representing not only farmers but processors, retailers, advisors, the whole organic chain, and we work mainly in three different fields. First of it is representing the sector just at a local, national, international level, mainly in Europe, where we have our permanent office in Brussels, and we work for innovation and communication too. In that regard of innovation, we work a lot with some universities to exchange about different studies that are needed to have the proper arguments to foster the organic sector. Then in this regard, we were very much focused on the climate change and how this affects the performance of the organic farming, and we have a study that I will present to you the results just to show how organics performs better than conventional in those extreme situations that we are facing. On regards to the climate change, we need to be very much aware that the measures that we need to put in place are not able to be made only in the moment that we are suffering the problems. We need to work on that in advance, and that will be part of our experience that need to be tackled by others that are starting to have those problems now. Look for the experience of others that are already suffering from some time ago. That's all. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Évelyne. Again, you've given some good tasters of what more we can dive into as this webinar progresses. Great, and can I ask the team in the office to play the recording from Carly, who's going to introduce her work at the university? The sound isn't working.
Yeah, we cannot hear her. Yeah, hear her.
It's not a proper webinar unless there's at least one technical issue. Okay, we'll just wait a few moments to see if the team in the office can resolve the sound. Otherwise, we'll go into a bit more of an introductory discussion with the panelists. Nika or Christiana, oh, this is looking promising. No, still can't hear.
Nika, maybe you need to unmute yourself so that we can hear your sound. Not sure, but
No, that's still not working. Okay, I think maybe it's best if we come back to the video presentation. So if you could please make the participants full screen again. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so let's just start off with a kind of a few basics. What I'd really like to cover in the discussion in the next 10, 20, 30 minutes is what some of the problems are that you're experiencing in your region or in the areas that you're working in, some of the solutions that you found, and some of the tools that are really being helpful to enable them. So if we could just touch upon those briefly, and then each of you will be diving in a bit more depth into some of the detail of your areas of work. So in terms of the challenges that you're seeing, could you describe to us how your region has been affected by extreme heat and how workers in the food system have responded? And Asan, you started to talk about that in your introduction. I wondered if you could speak a bit more to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Kyrgyzstan, especially in high altitude regions like Narin, Talas, and parts of the Sikul, so farmers are already witnessing the shift of seasons, earlier snow melt, drying of mountain springs, and more frequent heat waves, even in typically cool areas. For example, farmers in Narin report that potatoes planted at the usual time now often fail due to soil overheating and lack of. On the ground, responses have come not from high-tech solutions, but from farmer-led adaptation. So they've shifted to earlier planting schedules, so added mulching to retain moisture, and introduced drought-tolerant medicinal herbs like calendula, valerian, and others. And so workers in the food system, especially women involved in herb processing, so are diversifying income sources and using organic methods to stabilize yields in unpredictable seasons. So we are seeing a grassroots form a resilience emerging, and our role at BioKG is to connect and strengthen these efforts through knowledge sharing, education, and community-based certification.
Great, thank you very much, Asan. Évelyne, I'm wondering if in Spain, whether you're seeing similar impacts and how farmers are responding to that.
Yeah, as I already explained, we suffered these effects since some time ago. Then when you have those hot waves, the situation is very difficult. I mean, that you have no so many options. Just to be aware about which are your possibilities on terms of, for example, some oldest varieties that maybe perform better. I mean, there is a lot of that we need to dig into the varieties that have been placed in our territories since a lot of time, that maybe will have us an opportunity to be able to adapt to those very critical conditions. The question of the water for sure is a very, very key one. When you have hottest temperatures, then you have less water too, because there are more evapotranspiration. And then you in those cases where you are not having much water because there is a drought, then in increasing this problem, you have the high temperatures that already makes more needed the water that you don't have. Then in that regard, is very, very much needed that there will be some prevention measures that you need to take in place. But it's not only a question of farmers, need to be a question of the public sector too. I mean, there are some infrastructure that are really needed although at farm level or community level, you can put some of them in place. I'm talking about measures that reduce the water going out to the fields and then don't capture it properly. Then there are some measures that you can put in place to stop this water and increase the infiltration in the soils. And that's what need to be increase with the organic practices that helps the soils to have more resilience in that way. And this is working as far for the drought period in the same way that for the very raining period. I mean, it is always a good measure for everything that helps to keep the yields in a better performing than conventional.
Great, thank you, Évelyne. And someone from the Soil Association, hearing you talk about soil so early in the webinar makes me very happy. Hoi, I saw that you were nodding along to quite a lot of what Évelyne was saying there. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, actually, like Kazakhstan, in Vietnam, we also feeling the climate change impact for every day. Just a couple hours before I get wet from my office to my house, just 5 minutes by motorbike. We are facing a lot of how say sudden heavy rain now, and imagine that not only heat, but the heat together with the flooding causing too much trouble for our farmer. Okay, so you know that not just recently, but for the last I think 10 or 15 years ago, the winter have been shortened in Vietnam. That the farmer can no longer grow some very common crop like soybean. Because before we grow a lot of soybean, but now farmer cannot because the winter is shortened, and the summer heat is increasing. So together with other stress, environmental stress, that make farmer impossible to grow some crop like cucumber in winter. In summer. Before they grow a lot of cucumber in summer, but now they cannot. They cannot. So so it means that many crops have been more sensitive to climate change, and the farmer stop growing them, and it also a signal for a loss of biodiversity for farming crops and also for farming challenge in the future. And at the moment, even I see that it's getting more pressure that make even some agroecological farmer, innovative farmer, have to be surrender. Yeah, last year I met some good farmer, and they try to work on farm with some agroecological approach. But recently, when I see them again, and they said, no, I cannot survive, no longer survive with agroecology. So now I have to start to use antibiotic for my animal, or I start to use pesticide for my crop. So the pressure of climate change, have been produced more, more difficulty for our farmer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hoi. Lin, I'm interested to know whether these experiences that you've heard from the others are being borne out in your research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing research in Switzerland, but also all over Europe, and what I hear, I can very much sympathize with, because I think it's a similar picture in the areas where I research. And for Switzerland, we have the situation that we have like very mountain regions, and then on the other hand, you have the lowlands, which are suffering differently from extreme heat. So, for example, in the mountain areas, we have more the livestock keeping, which is severely suffering from the reduction of livestock feed because it's just that the grass is not growing anymore, and it's like, yeah, you can't feed your animals enough. So this leads to a shift also of livestock production in those regions. And then in the lower areas, you will see that the extreme heat, yeah, reduces the crop yields from various crops, from the grains, of course, but also from vegetable production, leading to sunburn by extreme heat. And you also see that the extreme weather events are in generally increasing. So, like, for example, a few weeks ago, I just had there was a huge heat wave followed by a lot of hail, and the hail was not a normal size, but it was really like a fist-sized hail. And I think this is what you see more commonly now, also resulting from climate change, that those extreme weather events, be it extreme heat or followed by extreme hail events, are increasing. And so we also see in general a whole increase of insurance cases for extreme weather events in agriculture production.
Yeah, that's an important additional angle, isn't it? So from all of you, we're hearing that it's the direct impacts of heat's a challenge, suitability of crops or getting varieties that work in the unprecedented conditions can be a challenge. The extreme nature of some of these weather events is a huge factor. And then I was pointing out about the combination with other stresses beyond heat and climate impacts are also adding another dimension. Hoi also mentioned about a farmer moving away from agroecology in order to still be able to farm. But I'm interested, and Lin, I'm going to come straight back to you. What is it about organic methods and an organic approach responding to climate change that is beneficial when trying to address heat-related challenges?
So I think one of the big advantages of organic and biodynamic farms is that they are already more diverse than conventional farming systems. And of course, at least from my practical experience, you see that if you have a more diverse farm, the losses are likely to decrease, because if one of the crops fail, or if one of your area fails in the farm, then you still have the possibility to come to another crop yield and to substitute this. So I think one of the big advantages of organic farms is the diversity that you have on the farm. And adding on this, I would also really like to add the kind of attitude of organic farmers, because from what I know from organic farms, they're often very eager to improve their farming systems and to learn new things and to try new things. And I think this is something which really helps with climate change adaptation, because we have to go for other crops, we have to go for other kind of production patterns. And this is really an advantage. So to give you a very practical example, in Switzerland, some of the organic farmers really started now to plant and cultivate sorghum, because this is more heat adapted than the wheat production. And although at the moment the market is not there, so the demand of the consumers is currently not really well developed, because I don't know how many recipes that are based on sorghum. I really had to check this, like what kind of recipes exist. But still, the willingness of the farmers to really try new crops like chickpeas or sorghum is there. And I think this is a big advantage that the organic movement has, this willingness to adapt their systems according to the needs of the environment and of the farm, so to say.
Yeah, great. And that point about almost proximity to market, so being able to innovate and then finding a route for crops into the market feels important. And Asan, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you said at the beginning with farmers, the diversity of farmers, the diversity of mindset of organic farmers being important, especially, and how that works with PGS. Could you talk a little bit about the diverse approaches that the farmers that you're working with are taking, and how that is helping to address the challenges caused by extreme heat?
Of course. So actually, so we are facing one of the, let's say, hottest summers in Kyrgyzstan. As you know, it is extreme continental country with extreme continental climate, and it is one of the hottest summers in our history. And as a farmers, as a practitioners, I guess many of you can imagine what our farmers are feeling nowadays. And I guess the most urgent issues we face due to extreme heat are, first is water scarcity. With less snowfall and faster snow melt, so irrigation sources dry up in mid-season. That's one of the biggest issues. Then crop instability. So those crops which had been reliable 10 years ago, for example, nowadays they're unpredictable. And so most of the farmers in Kyrgyzstan, especially in mountainous regions, so they are trying to find those crops which will be suitable for their climate nowadays. Then soil degradation. As you know, heat speeds up evaporation and weakens soil structure. So it is again the problem of irrigation, water scarcity, and farmer burnout and uncertainty. So especially among smallholders with little external support. And perhaps most importantly, it is data gaps. Many small farmers don't have access to localized climate information or decision-making tools. That's why, in our case, PGS, which includes peer-to-peer inspections and local observation, becomes more than a certification tool. It becomes a community-based monitoring system also. So these are what we are using, and these are the main issues our farmers facing these days.
Great, and I think your presentation is going to go a bit more into PGS, isn't it? So I don't want to ask you too many questions as a spoiler alert. Hoi, would you like to add anything more about why it is that organic farming and organic systems are in a good position to adapt to the challenges faced by extreme heat? You're on mute, Hoi.
Yes, thank you. We have a lot of scientific evidence and agroecological background to prove that organic agriculture, or agroecology in general is the best way to survive our farming, to survive our future in the risky future, and also better adapting to climate change. For instance, we have to back to 30 years ago. That time it's not really too much affected by climate change, but some innovative coffee farmer in Vietnam already adopt ground cover. Instead of using herbicide, they use like cutter, they use mower, because they see too much negative impact of herbicide on the soil, especially the soil microorganism, the soil animal, and also the coffee. So they already start to replace the herbicide by cutter in early 1990s. And recently, when I involved in a project, and I found out that in general, about more than 50% of Vietnamese coffee farmer already adopt with cutter instead of herbicide. And they realize that if they keep the ground cover, they will survive the coffee better. They get more yield, they get the better coffee quality, and the soil is visually improved with more moisture, more soil animal, with less production cost. So it means that when you capture more carbon into the soil, not only that help to mitigate climate change, but also improve soil quality and as well as improve your farming productivities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's a really interesting example. And we've heard a few people now mention how some of the techniques that organic farmers use, like diversity and like weed suppressing ground cover, weren't designed to address the challenges caused by climate change, but are having the effect of being useful mitigation tools. And Évelyne, I wonder if you could speak a bit from the Spanish perspective, how organic farming is itself adapting well to the challenges caused by extreme heat.
Yes, I must say, everybody, when there are such extreme events, are suffering. I mean, organics are not being happy with these kind of effects, but in any case, performs better. I mean, better than conventional farming. The main thing is that they are, as already mentioned, the biodiversity of the crops helps. This helps, but the main thing here is the how they manage the soil. The soil management is one of the key issues or the key elements. Sorry, to get the resilience of the crops organic better than the conventional ones. After these 5 years of drought, we have some farmers that their farms usually receive water to have the irrigation, but in that period there was not possible because there was no water. Then they compare the yields of organic with the yields of conventional, and in the conventional they lose 90% of the yields. In organic, 50%. I mean, although they have problems because they have less yields that in normal conditions, they have better results than conventional. This address our attention to the fact that organic will help to adapt to those climate extreme effects. On the other side, we need to pay attention to the new disease and pests that arise with these changes in the climate. Then, as far as the organic always use strategies and not only products to face those pests and diseases, they are more able to adapt to those new conditions, because when it is only resolved or only solved by using products, the products need some time to be tried, and these have long term for the conventionals than for the organics to be able to adapt. Although both suffer the same conditions, the capability for the organics farmers are better than the conventional. Then there is a very dramatic situation when you don't have the water and when you have those appearance of new diseases and pests. But in any case, organic always will solve better the problems than conventional.
Yeah, great. So you've made some brilliant points there, Évelyne. You know, starting with the fact that all farming is going to be impacted by climate change. We can't pretend that organic is going to be immune, because it certainly isn't, and the evidence is bearing that out. Also about using strategies, not products, to deal with pests and disease. But one of my favourite points, almost stepping slightly out of my moderation role into my own views on this, it's about the urgency of the crisis that we're facing, and the fact that we need solutions that are working today, that in fact were working yesterday and will work into the future. And that's why I think this conversation is so important, to be sharing the insights and innovations in farming that are happening now and working now to address the problem that we have now. So it's been great to hear some of your perspectives. Now, I think we are rapidly running out of time for this section. So do any of you have a question for any of the others on the panel? You weren't expecting me to say that, so I don't expect you to come prepared. But if not, we will try and get Carly's video, because I think that's now the sound is sorted, and then we will go into the more detailed deep dive presentations from all of you. So Nika, could you tell us if let's try the presentation again. Nika or Christiana, are you able to share your screen? Oh, yeah, here it comes. Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Hyland. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today. Unfortunately, I can't be there live. I think this webinar is about 5 a.m. my time, but really excited to be part of this really important conversation. So I'll go ahead and share my slides and give just a little bit of an intro about kind of who I am and what I'm doing. So like I said, my name is Carly Hyland. I'm an assistant professor of cooperative extension. And so I'm with UC Agriculture and Natural Resources, their cooperative extension division. And then I'm also with UC Berkeley School of Public Health and Environmental Health Sciences. And my position really focuses on farm worker health and climate change. And so I always like to give a little bit of background and just talk about why it is that I'm so passionate about what I do. So I am from Wisconsin, in the middle of the United States originally. And when I was in school there in undergraduate studies, I spent a summer in a rural community in Guatemala. And I was there really from an environmental science perspective, looking at soil nutrient levels in agricultural plots that the community members worked in. And as you can see, the very first day I was there, I took this picture on the left where, farmers were applying pesticides really with no protective equipment whatsoever. And they would tell me that they felt physically ill after applying pesticides, but didn't feel like they had access to education and resources to decrease their reliance on pesticides. And so that's really what got me interested in environmental health and looking at what are the impacts of these on the health of humans themselves. So fast forward a little bit, I ended up doing my master's in global health and the environment from UC Berkeley, graduating in 2017. And during that program, I spent a summer doing research in Costa Rica, looking at pesticide exposure and the health effects of pesticides between organic and conventional farm workers there. I also then did my PhD in environmental health sciences at UC Berkeley, working with the CHAMACO study, which stands for the Center for the Health Assessment of Mothers and Children of Salinas. And so this was a study out of the Salinas Valley in California, which is really kind of referred to as the salad bowl of the US, where I was looking at exposure to pesticides during pregnancy and early life and adverse health impacts later on in childhood. And then I did my postdoctoral studies at Boise State University in Idaho, where I was really looking at pesticide exposure and kind of risk perceptions of pesticides among farm workers there in Idaho, and hearing a lot of stories about, not having access to pesticide safety training or not understanding a lot about, the potential adverse health effects of pesticides, or feeling like farm workers had, the autonomy to, speak up if they had concerns about pesticides. And then starting about 2 years ago in August 2023, I came back to Berkeley as faculty here. And as I said, I'm really focused on farm worker health and climate change. So still doing some work on pesticides, but also kind of expanding that work. And one of the reasons for that is that farm workers are really one of the groups most disproportionately impacted by climate change, both in the US and worldwide. And so many of us know that farm work is a really, physically demanding occupation. It's often outdoors, at least in the United States. There's often limited implementation of kind of safety controls, such as, provision of PPE, following regulations to make sure that farm workers are safe. And we know that there's, co-exposure to all kinds of different potential hazards, including, chemical threats like pesticides, as well as physical and biological threats. And then again, at least in the United States, we also hear a lot about kind of psychosocial threats outside of the workplace that kind of just all build on each other to compound and impact the health of this population. And we know that, that's kind of the baseline level, and all of these exposures and health impacts are just going to continue to be amplified by climate change. And a lot of times in the US, there's, really limited access to health and legal resources in this population. We hear directly from a lot of farm workers about things like poor housing conditions. So when it comes to something like heat, a lot of workers are out working in the fields all day in very hot conditions and then come home and it's still really, really hot at home and just never really get that reprieve that's really important to, cool down. So looking at some of the health impacts specifically of heat, there have been studies that have found that in the US, farm workers have 35 times the risk of heat-related mortality compared with other occupational groups. And so this is just absolutely alarming. And we've also seen growing evidence from mostly the global south, so countries like Nicaragua, as well as like Sri Lanka and other Southeast Asian countries, that this chronic exposure to heat over and over is associated with what's called chronic kidney disease of unknown origin. And so a lot of times, mostly males, a lot of times individuals quite young without other existing comorbidities are being diagnosed with like end stage kidney failure. And it's really, really been, widely studied, and it's possible that there are a few potential exposures that are associated with this, but it is quite clear at this point that heat and work rate and work intensity is one of the biggest predictors of someone's likelihood of getting this chronic kidney disease. And then beyond heat, we know that there's increasing rates of, adverse respiratory outcomes, heart disease, allergies, and other acute and chronic health impacts due to things like, wildfires and poor air quality, as well as natural disasters. And one of the things that my research group is starting to look at a lot more is understanding kind of the economic precarity of many farm workers. So we're hearing directly from farm workers, if there's a wildfire or natural disaster and I can't work, I don't get paid. And so it's really difficult to pay for basic needs then, like groceries and healthcare. And then, I'm based here in California in the United States, which is, one of the only states that has an outdoor heat standard for agricultural workers and other outdoor workers. But at the federal level in the United States, there is no federal heat standard. There's no federal smoke standard, for example. So we're really lacking those important standards to protect farm workers. And also, even in states like California that are seemingly quite progressive, there's really poor enforcement of a lot of these standards. And one of
Okay, that seemed to stop rather abruptly. Nika, was that on purpose?
that a lot of my work focuses on is that farm workers are not exposed to each of these in isolation. We know that they're exposed to things like heat, pesticides, wildfire smoke, and all other kinds of psychosocial stressors in combination. And those are all interacting both to impact their health and also make the solutions to address this quite complex, because you're not just thinking about one thing and one solution. You're thinking about all of these exposures and how solutions may differ depending on where they live, what type of crop they're working on, what is the geography, etc. And so really, I think we need unique and creative approaches to identify solutions for a lot of these problems, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to kind of virtually be here and hopefully can remain part of this conversation, because I think we need to bring a lot of people to the table to address these really complex problems.
Great. Carly obviously is not on the call, but Carly, if you're looking at this back, thank you very much for that really interesting perspective and hearing about the impacts of heat-related events on farm workers. And Évelyne, you're very, you're using a fan very on point for this. Okay, let's go into the main presentation then. We've got each of our speakers today have 10 minutes each to give a bit more of an in-depth perspective on their work. And so we'll start with you, Lin, if we may.
Sure. I will share my screen again. So I have to admit, I already sneaked a little bit into the frequently asked questions and saw that some of the questions might be answered, hopefully, after my presentation. So I'm going to talk about the role of organic or soils in general when it comes to extreme heat. And just as an emphasis again, why it's important to consider soils and climate change adaptation now is that we just see the effects that we have just discussed upon now. So that's really that different regions are impacted in various levels by climate change. So and farms and farmers are very much impacted by climate change. So when it comes to Switzerland, we see that that the global warming or the weather is really warming up here. They have made this nice presentation of making it colorful so that it's really clear that you see that the red color is a warming comparison to the before period. So temperature is rising. And if we look at the impacts, you see that heat waves is one of the implications, but of course also the global warming in general impacts on various levels that are all relevant for farming practices in Switzerland. So be it heavy precipitations or snowy days, which are decreasing, or changing of growing season patterns and all of this. Having implications for the current agriculture practices. How much the agriculture sector and the different practices are impacted will highly depend on the degree of our actions. So this means that we still have to go for climate mitigation. And ideally, we bring together climate adaptation on the farms together with the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Because you see here that the climate change will not just have different implications for the different regions, but also different scales in those regions. If we look at soils, they are essential for agriculture production. It's very difficult to have agriculture and food production without soils. There might be a future where we have vertical agriculture farms and livestock production in houses and all of this. But up to date, we are very much relying on our soils to produce food. And the good thing is that with soils, we can do both. So we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and maybe even compensate some of them, although the extent of how much can be compensated by soils is scientifically very much under debate. And at the same time, if you invest into your soils, this can also help you, as Évelyne also mentioned, to really adapt to climate change and to reduce the implications of unavoidable climate change effects. Feeble has produced a very nice fact sheet on soil and climate. So this is basically about the climate impacts of organic soils and management. So if you're interested more into these climate mitigation aspects, then I would recommend to read this publication. It's available free and really shows the role of soils in the climate debate. And it highlights also in short the results from our DOC trial, which is a long-term comparison trial where we compare conventional farming systems with biodynamic and organic farming systems. And in the figure here, you see the summary results that organic soils really have been proven to reduce the CO2 equivalent, so the greenhouse gas balance. So we see that the conventional systems, which is the yellow and the orange ones, are having much more emissions in total than the biodynamic and the organic. So the biodynamic treatment is the green bar, and the organic treatment is the blue one. It's also very warm here. Sorry if I may mix some things. And you see this is partly related because of the carbon stocks. So these are the humus and the sequestered carbon, but it's also very much related to the lower nitrous oxide emissions. But now we want to focus on extreme events and extreme heat in particular. And there we see that although we have gathered a lot of knowledge already for climate mitigation, which is available for farmers, that the adaptation of climate change is a very recent topic for research and also for tool development. So for example, in the Climate Farm Demo project, we have really searched for all of the tools that are existing for climate change. And at the moment, there are about 138 different climate balancing tools, but none of them is integrating the aspect of adaptation. So this is really something where we have to speed up progress to really see that farmers need support in adapting to climate change, and really focus on soils and soil practices to be included in this debate. And if we go into more detail for the adaptation of soils and what it means to produce good soils that are resilient for climate change, then we can focus on three main aspects. So the one aspect is the organic substance, which is highly regulating water holding capacities and the nutrient availability. This second aspect is the soil microbiome and the microorganisms, which is very much related to soil health. And the third aspect is the soil structure, and which regulates the water retention, erosion regulation, and soil aeration. And all of them are kind of influenced by extreme heat. So it's really something which impacts the different aspects of soil on various levels, which makes it very important, therefore, to check those factors related to the soil. If we go a little bit more into detail, we see that the soil humus and the soil and the organic substance in the soil really much depends, of course, on the soil type that you have, but also on the climate. So it has been shown in research that if temperature increases, then also the soil content is likely to decrease. While it also depends, of course, on other factors such as the management practices, the residue management, the manure and fertilizer application, or also the microbiome. So it's not just one factor, but it's really this interaction of various factors coming together. If we look what can improve soil structure, then we are back to very basic organic practices, meaning we have to increase organic fertilizer application, we have to have a high plant diversity and integrate green fertilizers, we have to look for a constant soil cover. We have to check if a reduction of tillage management is possible. And overall, we have been seeing in the DOC trial that organic agriculture proves beneficial in comparison to other management practices. So this is what we see from the long-term trial, that really those physical parameters and also the chemical parameters, the faunal and the microbial factors, are beneficial when you compare organic and biodynamic practices with the conventional farming systems, which really highlights the role of organic as being a system where other agriculture practices can learn from when it comes to the question of how to establish healthy soils and how to integrate a more resilient soil into your farming practices. We see this in particular regarding the aggregate stability. So a few weeks ago, I had a very interesting call with a colleague from the University of Bern, and he really researched how aggregate stability leads to an increase of climate resilience. And he found that aggregate stability could be really a main factor as being an indicator for climate resilience. And we see this also in the dog trial. So we see that the areas which are having a lower aggregate stability are impacted more by extreme weather events, be it extreme precipitation or extreme heat. And this at the end results then in this lower or higher water holding capacity and higher resilience against extreme heat. Then I would like to shortly touch upon the soil microbiome, because that's also very important. And there we find that the soil microbiome is really helping to regulate not just the climate impacts, but also other fluxes and aspects of the soil. And one factor that is really impacted, especially by extreme heat and droughts, are the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, so the AMFs. They belong to the oldest terrestrial symbioses for agriculture production, and they are very essential for the management of various agriculture aspects. So they are relevant for the uptake of nutrients and water. They really help to support the soil structure and support erosion control, increased water retention capacity. And they also help to build a defense against pathogens. So if we increase those AMFs, either by direct management or indirect management, this is really beneficial for the soil in extreme heat events. So there are some applications of products that you can use. However, they're difficult to apply due to certain aspects, and also they can be supported by indirect management practices, meaning that chemical substances are avoided, like synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, that you again improve your plant diversity or go for a diverse crop rotation, and that you reduce your tillage management or go for organic agriculture. So if we sum up this short introduction, super short introduction into how soils are relevant for building a resilience for climate, I would say that soils are so important because they have so many different functions, and many of them are essential for our agriculture production. And they are actually a good way to bringing together the mitigation part for climate and also the adaptation part. And from the advisory work that we are supporting, for example, in projects like the Climate Farm Demo project, we see that the soils are really something where farmers are happy to start a discussion about climate resilient research and how they can improve their systems. So it's really something where you can start going into the discussion with farmers and other parties of the climate improvement areas, so to say. And of course, it's always important to really consider that the implementation of those practices depends so much on the different locations and on the farm realities that you have. So, for example, for some of the farms, one practice of reduced tillage might be a super good option, while for others, it's counterintuitive and not good. So this really needs that we need to strengthen advisory work and train people that are able to make assessments and support farmers and give them the information to implement the right practices that help them to stand against extreme heat events. If you're interested more into our work, then you're happy to look for our podcasts, our fact sheets, and also the newly established Farming for Climate platform. There you find a lot of practices how farmers can support their systems. And by this, I would like to thank for your attention and this possibility to show a short introduction.
Great, thank you very much, Lynn. Really interesting introduction and a really good piece of context. And obviously, once again, very important to be talking about soils and also making the point about mitigation, but also adaptation as being an essential area of focus. So thank you for that. Right, we're now going to go east much further east in Switzerland, over to Hoi, who's going to tell us a bit more about an approach that he has innovated. It's very interesting in this context. So Hoi, if you'd like to take the floor, please.
Yeah, can you hear me and also see my screen?
Yes, and yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank Lika and thank IFOAM International for giving me this opportunity to share you some of my research results for the last almost 10 years. Yeah, I did not intend for heat agriculture, but by accident, it really fit with increasing heat. It will be more productive under more heat. That's why it's really fit with your topic today. So my first, my initial thought to share you and also share you some question is that what happened to agricultural system when it is getting hotter, and it often associated with more sunlight, then we will need more water. We need faster release of water temperature. Otherwise, the even aquatic plant cannot survive or cannot well survive in such hot environment, like even kangkong I observed in Hanoi. And we also need more oxygen for faster biodecomposition in the system. And first, like you hear for the first two presentation, if you adopt organic practice like mulching, cover crops. I have to move this cover crop. And we use like manure or compost. We can help improving soil water holding capacity. So we will more or less effectively solve the need for more water. And for the second and the third, we can solve by circulating water current. Okay, and that fit into the circulating farming system. And what system do you think can work better in hot condition? Okay, and like Lin mentioned that we are still living on soil, but maybe we in the future the vertical farming or other land soil farming might play a role, especially for condensed high productivity and in condensed urban area. Then that is my target. Okay. And I'm going to present to you my research background, why to arrive at a all-in-one system, and the design of the system in general, and the system function, and also some advantage and limitation of the system. In 2016, I visited a friend who worked on aquaponics, and okay, and thought that this could be a good system for urban agriculture. Okay, and that time I found out that existing aquaponics system mainly work for very limited type of leafy vegetable, like lettuce, like brassica, or some other leafy vegetable. And myself, I start with the thought that if I want to make my system more impactful, I have to design it in a way that it can be grown as many types of vegetable as possible. So with that thought in mind, I start my own trial, and for initial 6 months, it failed. The fish die just few days. I start, and then actually the crop cannot survive. And after about 4 or 5 months, I realized that my mistake, the system mistake, is caused by inadequate running mechanism, and that did not provide sufficient oxygen for the system. So here, the oxygen not only necessary for the fish, but also for biodecomposition. And then I adjust it, and it worked. And then it allowed me to grow many type of vegetable, even woody, even rose, lemon, other type of climbing crop whatsoever. And I have tried different type of fish, from the easy one like carp, catfish, tilapia, and I also try very difficult one. And we can raise up to 100 kg of fish per cubic meter of water. It's really dense fish. And if you come from economic point of view, and you see that if you can have a condensed fish in a system, you save a lot of cost, production cost, and the risk also, the production risk for the farming activities. And from what I experienced with the system, then the system can be designed for shrimp as well. Okay, but we need to adopt some suitable crop for the system. I have tried, and the owner shrimp die, but I understand the mechanism now, and I have not have opportunity to try the shrimp again, but I have to try the difficult fish twice, and it worked. This is the fish. It is really expensive in Vietnam. It's a catfish, something like that, but really expensive, and also require a lot of oxygen to survive, this one. And I have tried them twice for about almost 4 years, and it worked. Another thing I want to mention here is that the system can work with different media like brick, waste, plastic, bamboo, gravel, yeah, many things. Yeah, the wooden roots, something like this, we can do. And you see the system here with very different crops. In the night of March 17, in 1980, own fish died, because that time I start the new fish in the early year. Own fish died, and it caused by electric cut. And I have searching solution from Singapore, from Hyland, but it's so expensive, and it also cannot 100% solve my problem, because even you have some sensor to warning you the system trouble, but if you at night time, yeah, it's not easy for you to run from home to the system to rescue this. So I come up with the new idea on chicken ponic, because I think that if the fish work, then the chicken should work. And for chicken, if electric cut, there will be no problem. So I designed the chicken ponic, and I received some fund from Alicia to test the harmful bacteria in chicken ponic. And the test results were very positive on vegetable safety, especially E. coli, coliform, salmonella, whatsoever. Okay, so you see the system, very simple here. And upon the success of the chicken ponic function, I come up with new idea on kitchen ponic, because that there are so many social pressure for waste disposal in Vietnam, because local people, they stand up and they fight against the waste disposal, because it causes too much hygiene problem, too much smell problem for them. So I think that because I study environment, so I need to do something for the environment, the Vietnamese environment. And I come up with the kitchen ponic, and you know that with more diversity of food waste, from rice to soup, to fish, to pork, etc., the system produce better vegetable quality while helping to solve waste problem in the city. And in 1990 and 1932, I got some fund from H&M project, and I do harmful bacteria test, and it's safe according to WHO based Vietnamese standards. And during the COVID time in 1991, I upgrade the kitchen ponic system into all-in-one system. And there you can have everything. You can have poultry, you can have fish, you can have waste, and you have vegetable and tree, all in a compact system. Okay. And basically the system including 3 major components. The first is the system is the engine of the system. So it includes chicken coop, tank for fish, and small tank for receiving chicken waste, and pump. And second is vegetable and tree. You can have many type of tree like star fruit, lemon, strawberry, etc. Okay, and you have control system, many timer and some controller. The system is designed with some extent possible adjustment of the function according to waste quality discharge. Because imagine sometimes you have party and you have a lot of waste, and then if you put all the waste in the system, there is some function. You need to adjust some function to make sure that the system can survive in such overloading waste. Okay, here's the system over time. And for you, for your easy imagination, you see that's the funnel to discharge waste and chicken manure. And this is fish tank. We have a lot of fish here, and here you have chicken coop. Okay, and you can raise hens for egg. You can raise chicken for meat. Okay, and you see that it's really hot in summer Vietnam, but the vegetable is quite good. And the hotter it is, the more vegetable I can harvest. Okay, and this is on my bonsai system in my house, and all collected to the system for auto irrigation.
Hi, I'm afraid we're out of time for your presentation.
Yeah, okay.
Now.
Just 2 minutes.
Yeah.
1 minute, okay. Here and here's just very fast that okay, you see the biological test for my vegetable. Okay, this is safe. And here also biological test. Okay, you can get the presentation from Lika. Okay, if you want. And some advantage, including the hydroponic leafy vegetable gain better yield than soil-based one. I haven't do experiment in detail, but it could be 1.5 or even twice more. Hydroponic tank allow more plant to be grown. For instance, I can have 15 to 20% fruit in just 1 square meter of the surface of hydroponic, as long as I have enough space for it. And it can be easily, in my system, it can easily create ecological stress to boost flowering and fruiting for fruit crop. And fish and vegetable are of very high quality, and the system function better in hotter summer. More vegetable harvest, healthier fish, more clearance of water, but except chicken. Yeah, chicken is it's bad for chicken. But if we will grow vegetable to cover, some climbing vegetable to cover chicken, it will be better for them. The system functions less well in cold winter in North Vietnam, and some maintenance. We need some sediment discharge for every 2 to 4 weeks, but we can just use it for the soil-based vegetable, and we need some maintenance for the discharge from receiving tank for every 2 to 3 years. And we cannot use antibiotic or chemical to treat water if your fish getting dizzy, but often they are very healthy because it's in circular system with a lot of oxygen, a lot of very hygiene and very good. So the fish is working quite well, and they are very happy in the system. And here you see that I made a new system in Hanoi, and imagine that after only 16 days, after only 19 days, the cucumber already have flower. Okay. And I have the video of the whole system here. It's about 2 minutes, but because there is no time, so I stop here. In case you want to see the video, I will get back later. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Hoi. And you have got some questions in the Q&A directly to your presentation, so it'd be great if you could have a look at those. But thank you, really interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so now we will go back across the globe. We will go east, back to Spain, and over to Évelyne. Love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my presentation.
Great.
Can you see?
Yes.
Yes. That was I going to introduce you a bit is how we did this adaptation into the Mediterranean approach. I mean, as I already mentioned, we have some advantages using organic practices than in comparison with conventional. And I'm going to show you the result of one study that we made comparing these two kind of systems in the agro-Mediterranean conditions, agroclimatic Mediterranean condition. Then if you see that the Mediterranean Sea is hitting 20% more quick than other world areas. I mean, it's what I already mentioned. We are starting to suffer and with a more differences than other places in the world. This situation is although worse in Spain because we are foreseeing an increase of temperature more than 1.3 grades in the few years, and foreseeing in 2100 5 grades of increase. This is because of the location that Spain have in the area. Then we have experienced, for example, the explanation of this very big drought period. It's what that in the Atlantic Sea ocean it was created a kind of wall in the ocean that overcomes all the rain over the country. Then we have no rains, we have no clouds, and this creates an increase of the temperature that was really high during this period, in addition to the drought period. We were very much focused on showing to the politicians that the organic can be a solution, or that at least can decrease the impact of this climate change and in our conditions, because there are a lot of studies that are not performed in our agroclimatic conditions, and then we need to explore more on that. Then we did a study in 2019 showing some differences between organic farming and conventional. And the general result of this study is that the organic wins in the most of the crops category in terms of CO2 emissions and adaptation. And we talk about hectares, but per kilo of product too, which is a bit different with other countries or situations. This study is available in English, but not the whole study, but a summary, a technical report that we call it, in our website. And the main objectives that we have with this study was focus on the greenhouse gas emissions quantification in an extended geographical area that is not only involving the Mediterranean one, but these other parts of the world that are similar to our conditions. We focus on productive systems. Then we are not talking about experimental farms, but on productive, and the type of emissions that we want to highlight, and the management that was made it in each of these places. At the end, we would like to have some figures about how performs these greenhouse gas emissions in the main systems that we have on crops, and to be able to see how the organic management affects to these results. We want to identify these greenhouse gases potential mitigations on the relevant practices that are performed in organic, and we would like to identify which are the research needs and the main information gaps that we have in that moment in order to be able to provide a room to improve those status. And at the end, the study objectives was to have a review of the state of the knowledge adaptation that we have in organic farming and in terms of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. When we compare in one of the main crops here in Spain, we are talking now about 200,000 hectares of olives that we have in organic in Spain, for example. We see that the average reduction in organic is 100%. It means that organic is minus 0.1 kilos of CO2 equivalents per liter, and then in comparison with the conventional, they are not reducing the emissions. They are over the emission 1.7 kilos. It is just because of the systems that are creating this difference. If we see in the figures the different emissions for the conventional and organic, the carbon sequestration is caused by the plants cover and the plants cover, and the organic amendments composted alperujo. Alperujo is a byproduct of the olive oil production, and when we include the pruning and we include the no use of external input, this creates this difference, the main difference between the two systems, and the carbon footprint can be reduced. There is a room for improvement in those figures that we mentioned, because not all the farms are using all the carbon sequestrations measures that we mentioned here. It is an average and can be improved in the future if those practices are more implemented. We did the same for the vineyards, and in this case we found that 33% of reduction is made in organic in terms of CO2 emissions or CO2 equivalents per kilo of grapes. And the machinery in this case is the most relevant carbon emissions, and it is possible to reduce it with some practices more in the way of no-tilling that are in this moment are not very much extended in organic in Spain.
Évelyne, if you could start wrapping up, please. A minute left.
Yeah. Then we made the same for citrics. We made the same for the winter cereals, where we found the main results, the better result in more varieties, where you compare organic production system that can have a negative carbon footprint. And if we go to the adaptation, that I think is the most relevant for this panel, and we found that we have some regions in Spain that are high risk of desertification. You can see it in the brown color. In that areas there is the most urgent need for adaptation. All the practices that we identify in these adaptations are well fitting with the organic systems, and the most important thing is that we rescue some traditional knowledge and heritage that has been hidden by the conventional practices and need to be rescued for those ancient knowledges that all farmers have, and can provide solutions that we are not having in this moment. I'm putting you only one example to see that those practices are just common sense, but maybe if you don't know it, you are not using it. Here in the south of Spain, there are some farmers that use the normal weeds that you have in your field to cover the fruits and reduce and create a shadow in the crops in order to save them for the heat temperature, so for the high temperatures that maybe can burn it and decrease the quality of the fruit. That is a very simple measure. This is made from the ancient, from the very traditional way of doing, but with the conventional system, we forget all of those practices. The use of new crops is always maybe a need in some places where there are not more room for adaptation to the current varieties, but the old varieties provide the possibilities to have more or bigger adaptation to those extreme climate conditions. Of course, they cover the seeding diversity or selecting the wilds is another way that will help us not only to create more CO2 sink in our soils, but to help to have this better adaptation to the water retentions that we need. As already was mentioned, the increase the biodiversity is a way to avoid new pests too, and the management of the organic matter, using the pruning rest, reducing the rest of the crops, using cover, organic fertilizers, and the circular economy, as I have already mentioned you with the Alperujo compost, is another way to save this energy and to create better soils that help us to be more resilient. Of course, the integration of livestock of the low tillage are other adaptation strategies that we can go for them. Then.
Right. I'm sorry, Évelyne, we are really running out of time.
This is the last one. This is the last one, sorry. Is just to create a virtuous cycle, because when we have negative effects, we have less negative effects if we improve these adaptation strategies and we decrease the impact of the adverse condition. At the same time that we create more diversity, more water retention, more infiltration, more nutrients are available, and the most important, more yields. Then this create more resilience crops. And you can see here how different is the way that the fields are reacting to the same extreme conditions. The In the top, you have an organic farm. Just beside to this farm is a neighbor. You have the soil destroyed because they don't have these practices of covering the soil. That's my last word.
Great.
And I would like to highlight you that there is an important European project which is named Climate Organic Net, that you can find some solutions that maybe are interesting for you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Évelyne. Information-packed presentation. It's really interesting. And I love seeing the pictures, so you get a really visual representation of the effects in practice. Okay, we're going to go very swiftly on back. We're going to go east again now to Asan. And please, could you share your presentation with us? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So can you see my presentation?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. And thank you for this opportunity to share our story with our organic IMAX. So looking at this image, you see the beauty and the majesty of my country, but behind this beauty lies a challenge. Today, I want to talk about how the communities living in these mountains are building climate resilience from the ground up using a unique and powerful tool, the Participatory Guarantee System, or PGS. So why does this matter? First, let's look at the context. Kyrgyzstan is a mountainous, landlocked country, and our rural communities are deeply vulnerable to change in the climate. This is not a future problem. The impact is happening right now. We are seeing extreme heat waves that directly affect our farming communities. And this translates into very real challenges for farmers. Severe drought, shorter and more unpredictable growing seasons, crop failures, and the slow, steady degradation of our precious soil. The very foundation of their livelihoods is at risk. But this is not a story of victimhood. I'd like to say it is a story of action. And BioKG is a federation of 9 organic regions, which we call organic IMAX, and we unite over 1,000 farming families in more than 20 villages. Our approach is simple: community-based organic farming using the PGS system, and we focus on combining practical solutions for the climate with a deep respect for our culture and the strength of our community. The farmer-led model has been recognized with the IFOAM Asia Organic Medal of Honor and the UN Equator Prize because it puts the real experts, the farmers, at the center of the solution. We know these changes are real because we have been tracking them. Our data collected over 10 years through our PGS system shows a clear picture. Farmers are observing that traditional crops like potatoes, cabbage, and beans are declining. They can no longer grow them in the same places or with the same success. We are seeing a fundamental shift in growing zones, driven by earlier snowmelt and highly irregular rainfall. As you can see in the table, there is a clear shift from traditional crops like potatoes and barley to emerging, more resilient crops like medicinal herbs. The land itself is telling us it's time for a change. And our farmers are listening. They're adapting with incredible ingenuity. First, of course, soil health. They're using mulching and organic composting to protect the soil from the heat and preserve every drop of water. Second is crop diversity. They are not just switching crops, but intercropping with medicinal herbs and other plants that support each other. They're also thinking about shade and tillage, planting shade trees and practicing reduced tillage to keep the soil cool and alive. But most importantly, this is all driven by knowledge sharing. In farmer circles, they discuss what works, what doesn't, and they collectively select the best seeds for the new conditions. As you see here, this is innovation in action. So how does all this individual knowledge become a collective strategy? This is the crucial role of the PGS. We've transformed it from a simple certification tool into a powerful engine for adaptation. It's a resilience tool allowing us to track climate impacts during every farm inspection. And also, this leads to data-driven adaptation because farmers make decisions based on shared real-world observations from their own fields. It fosters collective innovation, supporting the community to make decisions and innovate together, not in isolation. And finally, it's a learning system. PGS not a one-time stamp of approval. It is a continuous living process of learning and improving together. This process is also empowering the most vital parts of our community. Our women's initiatives are the forefront. Women are leading the way in herb processing, turning new climate-resilient crops into a source of economic empowerment for their families. And we are actively engaging our youth. They are bringing new skills in digital data collection and farm mapping, and they're essential for education and outreach, ensuring this knowledge is passed on to the next generation. From this journey, we've learned some important lessons that we believe are universal. Local approaches work. Community-driven methods are the most effective and sustainable. Farmer-led innovation is powerful, but it requires long-term engagement and trust. We need policy recognition. Funding and agricultural policies must recognize and support the PGS pathway as a valid and effective system for adaptation. And finally, when we talk about scale, we mean making the model replicable in other communities, not just making one project bigger. And in closing, I want to leave you with this image of our farmers. They're the heart of this story. They face the challenges every day, and they're the ones creating the solutions. And our motto says, the solution is already in the field. Let's cultivate it together. Thank you very much for your attention. So it was my short presentation.
Thank you, Asan, and you get the moderator's brownie points as well for finishing quickly. That's great, and what a wonderful and powerful quote to end on. It's so important that we remember the answers lie in the soil and the answers lie in the hands of farmers, and it's really important to uplift and empower farmers when trying to tackle these challenges. And you all, in different ways, express that in your presentations very strongly there, Asan. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got one presentation left from Carly. I'll ask the team to start putting that on the screen. But just to say, I think we're going to run out of time for an interactive Q&A. So if the panelists could answer as many of the questions that have been put to you in the chat function. And yeah, then we will hear from Carly and then we will start to wrap up. Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more kind of about the topic at hand here, and specifically talk a bit about kind of the compounding impacts of heat and pesticides on farm worker health. And so a few years ago, there was this really great report out of a group called the Union of Concerned Scientists titled Farm Workers at Risk, The Growing Dangers of Pesticides and Heat. I really recommend a look at this paper. But they were, really talking about there's 2.4 million farm workers in the United States. This is such an important part of our population, and yet they continue to be exploited and undervalued. And as I talked about in my introduction, really one of the groups most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And in particular, we're seeing how climate is impacting pesticide use, pesticide exposure, and vulnerability to pesticides. So I'll start with pesticide use. There's some evidence that with climate change and with changing patterns in weather and heat, et cetera, we're seeing pests are expanding their range. There are some scientists who think that in increasing heat, the effectiveness of pesticides decreases, and so perhaps we need to use more pesticides to achieve the same effect, and perhaps we're having to use new combinations of pesticides to address these new impacts of climate change and heat. One of the areas where I think we have the most kind of science, but in this area is looking at how climate change is impacting pesticide exposure. So we know pretty well that some pesticides, depending on their chemistry, the volatilization increases as heat increases. And so that could, directly result in increased airborne concentrations of pesticides directly to workers, and increased exposure via inhalation. And again, as I talked about previously, like maybe there's even more pesticides or new combinations of pesticides and other ingredients that are being used. And then looking at pesticide vulnerability, there's some evidence that the body's ability to metabolize pesticides and other environmental chemicals decreases with increasing heat. Of course, with pesticides, this increases the need to wear things like personal protective equipment, but that also directly increases the risk of heat-related injury. So this is kind of one of the things I was alluding to in my introduction, where these are complex problems. The solution for pesticides is wear more PPE, and a lot of times the solutions to protect yourself from heat are wear lighter, breathable clothing, maybe not, a big respirator or face mask, which is recommended when applying certain pesticides. And then we also know that, pesticides are also interacting with other climate intensified exposures. Like I said in my intro, farm workers are not exposed to these in isolation, and they're all interacting to impact their health. And I think this is just one, of many illustrations to kind of highlight that, the figure in the slide here. And this is showing on the left-hand side kind of the intensity of pesticide use in California. And then on the right-hand side of the figure, looking at where heat is going to continue increasing the most. And so you can see, particularly in the Central Valley, kind of, this big region along kind of the center of the state, there's really a big overlap there between where are the most pesticides used and where is it the hottest. And so really just underscoring that it's the same population that is going to be most disproportionately impacted by both of these. And I think, data can be really helpful to look at, but I also think it's really important to hear directly from farm workers and kind of understand how is this directly impacting them. And my research group, both in California and Idaho, has done some work on pesticides and heat and other projects. And I'm going to share some quotes that we've heard directly from farm worker participants. So you can see one person say, when it is hot outside, I tend to wear the least PPE for the heat. I only use a sweater because if I put on more layers, I start sweating so much, I feel suffocated. Another person directly indicating that they're very worried about being poisoned from pesticides and saying we don't wear masks because of the temperatures in the sun. And then last summer, my research group did a project looking specifically at pesticide exposure among pregnant farm workers. And we heard one participant say, I've had a headache and wanted to vomit because of the heat. You feel the pressure and your head hurts and it makes you feel dizzy. And this individual said that while working at 37 weeks pregnant. And so I think, these quotes really speak for themselves and really underscore the absolute urgency in thinking about increased protections for pesticides and heat. And so I was part of a research and policy outreach fellowship where we were thinking about exactly that. And so in my group, we worked on a project specifically for the California Environmental Protection Agency, where we were providing recommendations about how we think their current pesticide risk assessments really are not sufficiently taking into account the increasing impacts of heat, and how their risk assessments really may be kind of not accurately understanding the potential risks of pesticides to farm worker health, given this increase in pesticide use, exposure, and vulnerability that I talked about. And so we made a few direct recommendations to the Department of Pesticide Regulation, which is one of the offices within, or one of the departments within Cal EPA. And really one of the things that we were recommending is trying to gather an interdisciplinary group within Cal EPA with different expertise and try to understand and try to study better, like quantitatively, what are perhaps the impacts of heat and climate change on pesticide use and exposure, and how can we start to build that into risk assessments. And I will say This is an area that is really, I think, increasingly being studied, but there are still a lot of data gaps. A lot of what I presented about, pesticide use, exposure, and vulnerability are really kind of hypotheses at this point that are grounded in, scientific information. But really, we do need more, actual studies and experiments and tests, in controlled situations, not with humans, to actually understand, like, quantitatively, if the temperature increases by this much or the humidity increases by this much, what is the actual, chemistry and effect of increased volatilization for a specific chemical, for example? I think that this gets really quite tricky because there's so many different, pesticides and chemical formulations that are used that it's almost like, from both Cal EPA and US EPA's perspective, they're often used to regulating one pesticide at a time. So you would really need information for each specific pesticide product. And so I think our group is trying to push to understand a little bit more, how could we do this at more of like a pesticide class or overall pesticide approach, and really arguing that the current assessments probably are not sufficiently protective of farm worker health. And so I think this is where the conversation, and again, I really wish I were actually here live as part of this conversation, because I'd love to hear from all of you. What are your ideas? I think it's quite obvious that organic and regenerative agriculture is one really exciting potential solution to this, because you're taking away pesticide exposure. And I also just wanted to kind of give recognition to this organization in the United States called the Equitable Food Initiative, which is another certification to show that, the food was produced by workers who were treated equitably, paid fair wages, etc. And I think starting to think more holistically about farm worker health, and like I've kind of repeated a few times, thinking about both exposure to pesticides and heat and all of these other exposures and concerns is really, really the way that we need to move forward in this field, and hopefully start, treating our farm workers, both in the US and worldwide, with dignity and respect, and being sure that they're paid a living wage, so that they can take care of themselves and their families, because they're the ones who take care of all of us. So thank you again. I'm really sorry I couldn't be here live, but I'd be very excited about engaging in this conversation after the webinar, especially if you have ideas for solutions or want to think about ways that you might be interested in contributing to this work. So please do feel free to email me at any time. And thank you again so much for having me be part of this conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Carly, in your absence. And thank you very much for the inspiration and motivation from all our speakers today, and the questions also from you, the audience. There's been some great ones, and we've tried to get through as many as we can. I'm sorry if we haven't quite made it to yours. But we've heard today about the innovations to not only mitigate the impacts of climate change, but adapt to the challenges that extreme heat's posing. We've heard some really clear themes emerging around the importance of soil health, diversity, both in terms of varieties and crop types, and how the voice and insight of farmers must be central to solutions. We've also heard a bit about the performance of organic farm systems in the face of climate change, indicating not only the theory, but the impacts of why organic agriculture can play a leading role in a warming world. What we've been talking about today aren't just nice ideas either. They're practical and they're essential action. A recent report said that with just 2 years to meet the 1.5 degree limit of warming at the current rate of emissions, if we're to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of the climate crisis. So the world needs organic agriculture, and the inspiration, innovation, and action from organic farmers are really leading the way to a brighter and cooler future. So watch this space, and if you're not already a member of IFOAM Organics International, please join us, as the future is organic. And now, if you liked our webinar, please visit our YouTube channel, where all of the previous webinars and future ones are hosted. And if you could just click through to the next slide of the next webinar, which is on Japan's road to a sustainable and organic future. You can register now on the IFOAM website. And if you've got ideas or topics that you'd like us to be looking at or like us to be discussing in the webinar, please feel free to email us and let us know. Next slide, please. And finally, thank you very much for your time. Please scan the QR code if you'd like to know more about joining IFOAM and supporting our work and being part of this amazing network. I would just like to thank, speaking of amazing network, the presenters today. I really am honoured to have moderated this session amongst such brilliant and insightful speakers. So thank you to all of you on behalf of me and the audience who've joined us today. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much and take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.